The Democratic Republic of Congo faces a crucial test of its democracy in the next few months. Its president, Joseph Kabila, the son of Laurent Kabila, is term limited. Opposition leaders are encouraging him to honor the Constitution and allow a peaceful transfer of power to his successor. Many worry he will not. Others hope that growing unrest, especially among youth activists, might just usher in an African spring of democratic renewal. For a closer look, we welcome, in Chicago, Illinois, Kambale Musavuli, human rights advocate and national spokesperson for the Friends of the Congo. In New York, New York, Séverine Autesserre, author of The Trouble with the Congo. She's also associate professor of political science at Bernard College, Columbia University. And here in our studio, Glenys Babcock, president of Pragmora. That's a policy think tank and grassroots advocacy organization aimed at preventing and resolving international conflicts. And we're delighted to welcome Glenys, you here, and our guests in Points Beyond to our program here tonight. Let's just start with a bit of a fact file for a part of the world that I suspect our viewers don't think about as much as perhaps we ought to. Let's bring the map up if we can, Sheldon. There's the Democratic Republic of the Congo in Africa. It is about the size of Western Europe. It is also one of the least developed countries in the world. If you go to the UN's Human Development Index, you will find it at number 176 out of 188. A little history. The Congo gained its independence from Belgium on June 30th, 1960. It has a population of almost 80 million, but 2/3 of them live below the poverty line. The median age is 18 years old. The population is very young. More than 40% of the people in DRC are between the ages of just born and 14. The average age expectancy is not good, only 57 years old. DRC's blessing and its curse are pretty much the same thing. It has abundant natural resources. The nation is known for its mining, that's copper, cobalt, diamonds, tin, gold, also known for mineral processing, consumer products, timber, and cement. Okay, let's get into this if we can. Séverine, I'm going to go to you first. There are 54 countries in Africa, and you've devoted a good portion of your life to this one in particular, traveling there frequently, conducting interviews with people on the ground there, rebels, soldiers, activists. In your view, why should we be paying attention to what happens in the DRC over the next several months in the lead up to potential elections?
Well, there are many, many reasons, but three of the most important ones are first that the Congo is the stage of the largest ongoing humanitarian, one of the largest ongoing humanitarian crises in the world. There are more than 1.5 billion people who are displaced in Congo because of the violence that has been continuing for the past 20 years. Another reason is that the war in Congo is the deadliest war since World War II. And the third reason is that the Congo hosts the largest and most expensive United Nations peacekeeping mission in the world.
Okay, well said. Let's do a little background here on the man who is at the center of the drama unfolding in DRC, Joseph Kabila. He came to power in 2001 at the age of 29 after his father Laurent was assassinated. He led a transitional government that brought about the country's first democratic elections in more than 40 years. His second term is supposed to end in the middle of December of this year. The Constitution states a leader can't serve more than 2 terms. If he does abide by the Constitution, he would become the first ever Congolese president to step down voluntarily for an incoming elected president, which obviously, Glenys, has many people wondering whether that's in fact going to happen. How do you think DRC's fared under his 15 years in power?
I think it's mixed, and I think it's really easy right now to look at the human rights violations that have been happening, suppression of opposition and speech, targeting of youth activists, nonviolent youth activists, particularly of an organization called Lucha. The fact that he hasn't called elections and everybody's waiting, or elections haven't been called and everybody's just waiting for this to happen, not knowing what course it's going to take.
Can we just understand that? His term ends in the middle of December, but he has not, in fact, called elections to replace himself yet.
Okay, so he is the independent Central Election Commission that is supposed to call, but we all know it's anything but independent. So the interesting thing about the Congolese constitution is it says that a president can serve a maximum of 5 years in a term and a maximum of 2 terms. But with tremendous wisdom, Article 222 says under no circumstance can those two provisions be changed. So you've seen referendums in the Republic of the Congo and Rwanda just in the last few months that have changed terms that can't happen in the Congo.
Here.
So we know President Kabila is behind it, but there have been all these trial balloons to try to get him extended beyond December 19th.
Kabila, I gather the word for what's happening there is glissement, a kind of a sliding, right? Is that the way you understand that?
Definitely. I mean, there is no political will on the part of the governor, Joseph Kabila, to hold elections. This was pretty much known since 2011, when he was announced as the winner of the 2011 elections. Now the call is to see how the people will react to that. You know, we've seen in 2015 young Congolese who have mobilized in what we call the Telema uprising, and they were successful in stopping the government for introducing an electoral law that would have made it mandatory to have a census before the elections. And we continue to see the tension on the ground. Kabila, as Glenn has mentioned, has not said publicly if he will stay or will go. But every indication that we see on the ground, all the signs we're seeing is that he wants to stay in power.
Kabila, do you think it's accurate to call Kabila a dictator?
I think it's an understatement. I think whenever you mention dictator, I don't think you're able to capture the brutality of that regime. Many youth have been imprisoned. I can't even go before the imprisonment this year. Joseph Kabila is a former rebel leader who was part of the Rwandan forces who came in the 1996 rebellion. He was one of the commanders at the Rwandan forces and some of the Congolese forces who massacred Rwandan refugees at the Tingi refugee camp, which we hope someday the victims will receive justice. There have been many people during his regime who have disappeared, who have been imprisoned or put in exile. And then we can also look at his economic records of how he has mismanaged the country and how he has even, in some reports, said billions of dollars of embezzlement of the wealth of the country.
Severine, let me ask you about the possibilities, if in fact a vote is called for December, of that actually happening. And to that end, a few years ago, we did talk to an election monitor who was there in the DRC for the 2011 election. She said that probably north of 1.3 million votes either were lost, disappeared, the election was fixed in her view. It's now 8 months until the next potential election in the Congo. Does the government, in your view, have the time, the resources, the ability to put together a clean election in that time?
As to whether it is possible, yes, it is doable, not only because there is the government, but also there are many international partners who have said that they are more than willing to help the Congolese government organize these elections. The United Nations peacekeeping missions was extremely important in organizing the 2006 and the 2011 elections. And again, they can play a very extensive role in helping the government organize these elections. There are, of course, numerous problems to overcome and numerous obstacles to overcome. For example, there are logistic problems. There are the fact that resources are very slim, and the government is constantly saying that it doesn't have the resources. But what's really important is not to focus on only whether elections can take place on a specific date, but also to think about what's going to lead up to the elections. Because what we saw in 2011 is that, yes, elections took place at the right date, and there were quite a few problems during the elections. There were votes that were lost, there were intimidations, there were polling stations that, for example, had more than 100% of the votes for Kabila. So there were a lot of problems. But to me, what was even more important was what happened before the elections, where people were campaigning, where opposition members were campaigning, and the campaign was not free and fair. People were subject to a lot of intimidation. They were threatened. Opposition members were threatened. Their supporters were harassed. They were jailed. So the elections were actually fixed even before election day. And that's really something that we don't want to happen again this year.
We heard a reference earlier in our discussion to Lucha, which is a youth movement in the DRC. which is obviously trying to have an influence on what's happening there right now. Let's just play a little clip from a recent BBC documentary on the growing Congolese youth movement called Lucha, and then we'll come back and chat. Sheldon, if you would.
Qu'est-ce que la lucha? La lucha, c'est un mouvement de jeunes, des jeunes comme vous, qui ont été motivés, indignés par la situation actuelle de notre pays sur tous les plans, sur le plan social, sur le plan politique et consorts. La lucha est un mouvement non violent qui est notre force principale. Et moi, je suis la preuve que le jour que la lucha va commencer à être violent, briser les vitres, je serai la première à me désengager.
Si on veut obtenir les élections en novembre prochain, il faut qu'on les amène plusieurs fois au cours de cette année, d'ailleurs à partir d'aujourd'hui, plusieurs fois sur notre terrain, sous la rue, en demandant des petites choses, comme le calendrier électoral, comme le respect du processus, comme l'argent, le budget pour la Commission nationale indépendante.
Congo, nouveau, c'est-à-dire Congo, nouveau, mon pays, Congo, c'est ma nation, Congo, c'est ma patrie,
Congo is my country, they're saying at the end there. Why do you think, Glenys, this group is gaining members and attention?
I think it's really easy. They've impressed everybody. They are absolutely committed to nonviolent action. They started small in Goma, in the east of the country, advocating with the local government for 15 more kilometers of paved road. They worked on getting clean water. So they're about good governance and youth involvement. But as they were then arrested and attacked by police for their protests, and as the crisis has been looming on democracy and whether these elections are happening, they've spoken up on that. And they have, since March of last year, when one of their leaders, Fred Baumo, was, I'm going to say disappeared. He wasn't just arrested. He was taken for 50 days in isolation. Nobody knew where he was and so on by the intelligence agency. These young people continue to go and do non-violent protests. They've had the guts to go right on the lawn of the people who have taken them in and arrested them, of the police services in Goma. And they go back and they go back and they go back, knowing the consequences.
And these are young kids?
They're young. The youngest is 21-year-old Rebecca. And it's not her first time being taken. I am in awe of their bravery. And the European Union has passed a resolution supporting them, the UN, France, the UK. I mean, they are just known for their nonviolent and their focus on, as they said in the new Congo.
Kambale, how united do you think the opposition groups are in finding a champion who can be someone seen as an alternative to Kabila?
What I'm interested in, at least the people that we work, is to create a process that will make sure that whoever replaces Kabila does come from the Congolese people, and that the people in the country see the process as transparent and they can trust in it. I see similar processes here in the West. No, I'm going to mention in the United States. We have presidential candidates, some of them I disagree with, and then there is a primary elections where whoever is running for the country is coming to the people explaining what they will do. That's my hope also for the Congo, that someday we can have the leaders, rather than flying into Washington, into Paris, or Toronto, or many places around the world to seek power, that they will actually travel villages to villages, telling the Congolese people, this is why I'm running, so that we don't just remove Kabila from power and have a new leader who does not represent the interests of the people.
If I may?
Yeah.
My view is that there are a number of good alternate leaders. That right now, not just Moshe Katumbi, but there's a variety that are coming forward that people will be willing to vote for. And
So you should tell us a little bit about Katumbi, though. He's a pretty fascinating guy.
Yes, he is. Maybe one of the most interesting things is he owns the best soccer team in Congo, and that makes him popular right there. He's also
worth $100 million.
He's very wealthy, and he's got charisma. There have been questions about illegalities in the past, so like any presidential candidate who comes forward, no doubt these kinds of questions and issues will arise. But there are others as well. Vital Kamerhe, who ran last time. There are 5, 6 who would be fine president. I'm not saying I choose them. I don't speak on behalf of Congolese people. I agree. But there are people there, and I don't want to have the impression left that because of the dictatorship in the last few years, that this doesn't have all the potential for a vibrant democracy. It does. It really does.
Séverine, do you see do you see a smooth way of giving President Kabila an honorable departure that could still, in the time left before December, be organized?
I don't. I wish there was one, but the way I see things is that we're currently facing the classic dilemma of post-conflict countries or conflict countries that have to choose between peace and justice, or democracy and justice. Because when you're thinking about why President Kabila would want to hang on to power, even though he's supposed to leave office, and even though everybody or most people in the country says that he should leave office, you can see several reasons. The first one is that he's worried about his own security. What will happen to him if he leaves power in December? He might face charges of corruption. He might face charges he might be asked to answer for crimes committed during the war that his troops committed during the war. He might also lose a lot of the fortune that he has been able to gather when he was president and before when his father was president. So he's worried about what will happen to him and his family and his followers. But at the same time, the Congolese people have a right to ask for any of their leaders to respond for the acts that they have committed. So the very smooth and easy way to pave the way for a peaceful transition of power would be to give Kabila insurances that if he leaves power, he's not going to face any kind of prosecution. He's going to be given a golden parachute. He's going to be able to go, like many other authoritarian leaders before him, to go maybe in another country or maybe to retire in his home country and to enjoy security, to make sure his family is safe and to keep his fortune. But that's the kind of thing that would stand against justice and that would stand against democracy. So it's really a really tough choice that Congolese people have to make.
Let me share with you the comments of an MP from Tanzania named Hamisi Kigwangalla, who wrote the following on AlJazeera.com. Although looking back, no one predicted the Arab Spring, many scholars of the African political landscape find it inevitable. We have our own generation of corrupt and autocratic leaders and bureaucrats. There are growing inequities, rising rates of unemployment, and an unbearable cost of living. We also have an active youth that constitutes a huge chunk of our population, as well as rapidly expanding literate and urbanized middle class. So, will we have an African Spring in the very near future? Kambale, how would you like to answer that?
It has been happening on the African continent way before even the Arab Spring. I remember in 2008, 2009, the youth of Gabon and Burkina Faso were already organizing in the country. Specifically speaking about the Congo, February 25th, 2011, we had the Arab Spring with a million people right at Tahrir Square in Egypt. But right in Congo, in Furu, in Butembo, we had young Congolese who were mobilizing to stop the law that was removing the second round of the elections. They were trying to get 100,000 signatures at the time, but it was not in the press. So this is the moment for the African continent of young people uprising. But it's not just happening in the Congo or on the African continent. It's happening around the world. I saw it in Russia. I'm seeing it in the United States with the youth of Ferguson, who demanded that they be seen as human beings. So now back to the Congo. Why it's important for the world to even watch what's happening there. If the Congolese people or the Congolese youth, they are successful at transforming the country this year and in coming months or year, it will affect the entire region. We see what happened in Congo-Brazzaville with Denis Sassou Nguesso, who's latching onto power. We are seeing also in Rwanda and Uganda, the president of these countries who are still in power, in the case of Uganda for over 2 decades, in the case of Rwanda, changing the constitution. We're looking at Angola, which is also a bordering nation of the Congo, where Dos Santos is still around. But if the Congo, a country, the fourth largest country on the African continent by size, by population actually, and the second by size, if they are successful, it will transform the 9 bordering nations and also send a message to the African continent that there is a wave of change.
Glennis, let's follow up on that a bit because, yes, Kambale is right, 9 different neighboring countries around DRC, and some of the leaders in those countries have been around for a very, very long time. I guess it was a couple of years ago in Burkina Faso, the people overthrew the leader who had been in power for 27 straight years there, so it can happen. Question is, if they do somehow figure out a way to transfer power peacefully later this year in the DRC, what kind of an example do you think that would set for the whole continent?
I think it would be really incredibly powerful. If it doesn't happen, just as Kambale says, there's going to be ripples to these countries around, and we don't know how that could possibly snowball. The contrary, if there's a peaceful transition of power, it will speak enormously to what is possible in the Africa. But the Moshe Katumbi, who we've talked about, who's one of the presidential candidates, he's putting out the option to Kabila to be the father of democracy in the Congo. Pragmura puts out, you can be a hero, Kabila. So there's actually more leverage, I think, than Severine has said, or has maybe added in terms of having him leave peacefully with carrots and sticks, with sanctions and options that are credible. And Moshe Katumbi has also said immunity is necessary. We may not like it, but after 20 years of horrific war and ongoing armed conflict, maybe that's the pill that the Congolese people want to take.
So a dictator could be the father of democracy in the heart of Africa.
Yes. A little bit more context. In 2006, he was democratically elected. He was in power. He was put into power after the assassination in 2001, ruled for 5 years. And after those 5 years of rule, he is then democratically elected in 2006. Lots of international observers, including Canadian, who all said, there's some irregularities, but all in all, thumbs up. So in 2011, things change. He takes the election. So it's more of a mixed history than just a brutal dictator all this time. He's also presided over the end of the wars and peace agreements and so on.
Let me follow up on the war angle with Severine. We haven't talked much about it yet. The fact that this country is in the midst, I guess in your first answer you told us, that they are in the midst of a brutal, brutal war that has persisted with much foreign intervention. Bring us up to date on that. Where do things stand right now on that, Severine?
So the war started in the 90s. It started in 1996, and then there have been ups and downs. And now, supposedly, the war is supposedly over. But that's only official discourse, an official statement. When you are on the ground, and especially when you are in the eastern provinces, you see that every day you hear reports of fightings. You hear report of being attacked by unknown armed groups or by unidentified armed men. Or you hear reports of villages being attacked. Women are being threatened and raped very frequently. People, again, live in fear. Many of them have to leave their home because the violence is so present in their village, in their cities, in their environment. So in the eastern provinces of the Congo, you do not have any kind of peace. In the other parts of the country, it's more a kind of order and stability with, again, in the past 10 years, you have had flare-ups of violence, but it's much more peaceful than in the eastern provinces, which are really the epicenter of the violence because of foreign armed groups, as you mentioned, armed groups coming from other countries, from neighboring countries, but also because of domestic armed groups. Armed groups who oppose the president, the government of President Kabila, and armed groups who are also extremely interested in maintaining their own power at the local level.
Let me follow up with Kambale on the mining angle, which you brought up in the midst of that answer. And I guess I need to have a better understanding, Kambale, in your view, how the whole lucrative mining sector in the country contributes to the ongoing violence. What do you think?
It's twofold. So you have the illegal mining of mineral resources, and you have the quote-unquote legal mining or odious contracts that are signed by Western mining corporations. Some of the illegal mining goes through Rwanda and Uganda through smuggling of the minerals. But then you have specifically Canadian mining companies who have contracts where they have 10-year tax holiday for the case of Banro, for example. You have Envel Mining who were implicated in the Kilwa massacre for arming or providing logistics to the Congolese army who killed civilians in the village of Kilwa. So you have those two dynamics happening at the same time, but mainly it's because of the lack of state presence and the lack of strong government to be able, on one hand, to deal with Western mining, getting odious contract, on the other hand, provide security and control of lands where you have rogue militia groups living in those areas. But now to come back to what can be done, specifically in the case of Canada, I think it will be important for Canadians to question some of the Canadian mining companies who are in Congo. Are they paying taxes to the Congolese government? Are they actually protecting the environment? Are they signing contracts that are fair to the Congolese people? All those things are things that Canadians can do. But on the other hand, we can also ask to Trudeau, the government of Trudeau, to make sure also to put pressure at all these mining companies who are traded at the Toronto Stock Exchange as they engage also in the context of Congo still becoming much more stable over the years, to not exploit the Congolese people as well.
Glenys, I gather we do $3 billion a year in mining business, mineral exploration in DRC. So are we, I guess we're players over there to a certain extent, aren't we?
I'm just focused on how do we get Kabila to step down within the confines of the Constitution, and there Canada and other countries can take concrete action. I think the issues around the mining and the environment and taxes, it's all important. Next year, we need to get the elections.
Well,
that's what has to happen.
Let's ask this. Canadian citizens have put $500 million into the DRC, right, through our foreign aid.
Yeah.
So we have some say, I guess. How actively do you want our Prime Minister or our Foreign Minister to say what goes on over there?
Stop with the money. I mean, this is great, the international aid, but what needs to happen now is about getting the elections. So it was just announced in, actually, the Harper government was very hands-off, and I think the Trudeau government is just trying to get up to speed. It's very complex. So it was just announced a few weeks ago by our ambassador, Jeanette Martin in Kinshasa, that we are going to give $3.4 million towards the elections. Oh, and there's another $10 million to help educate the Congolese people on democracy and their rights. And in the Congo, it's going to be go through the Central Election Commission. Well, this is nonsense. It's the Central Election Commission that's not calling the election. It's their job to make sure that this democracy and election happens. The Congolese people just finished provincial elections for their governors, basically premiers of the provinces. They've had 2 rounds of elections, even though the last one was essentially stolen. They get it. Countries, and they've got the same voter turnout as Canada's had in the last couple of elections. They get democracy, but here we're putting $10 million into educating them about their rights and only $3 into actually the function. And as Severine said, to get the elections to happen, it will take money to get the ballots printed, the people out, the boxes, the logistics of it.
And Kambale, if we don't see some greater indication from the president on what he intends to do you expect an uptick in the violence in DRC?
I am not hoping for that to happen, but every indication is that people will rise up. It's a situation in any country around the world when people have democratic aspiration. My hope is for people around the world to shine light on the issue. The reason why, I do believe actually, the reason why some of the young Congolese who are in prison have not been harmed or been killed in prison is because their names have been lifted up outside. And it's important for those who love peace, for those who love democracy, for those who are hoping for a better Africa, to continue to shine light on the Congo, since the Congolese people are going to be very active in transforming the country. And the first question that actually you ask Severine, why should people care about the Congo? The Congolese people are members of the human family. If you care about your sister, your mother, or your siblings, you should care about the extension of your family members who are in the Congo as they struggle to transform their country.
Kambale Musavuli, this is a good place to finish up our conversation. Thank you for that. You're the spokesperson for the Friends of the Congo. We thank you for joining us on the line from Chicago, Illinois. In New York, Severine Autesserre, her book, The Trouble with the Congo. She from Barnard College, Columbia University. and Glenys Babcock, president of Pragmora, the policy think tank. We thank all of you for joining us on TVO tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.